Filmmaking can get expensive, and it seems the longer you do it, the higher the price tags. But I mean, let's be honest, if filmmaking wasn't expensive, would it still be fun? Yeah, it would be, like probably way more fun. But not everything that's useful in this world will make your wallet shed a tear. Today, I'm going over 13 filmmaking accessories / tools you'll actually use and that I use on almost every single shoot regardless of what I'm shooting. Now, this isn't just a list of cheap crap, it's gear I use and have used for many years on professional shoots. So rest assured, this stuff is built to last. Also, the last thing on this list is one I thought I would never use, but it's turned out to be one of the more useful tools that I own. So stick around to the end for that one. Additionally, there are links to all this stuff in the description if you want to check any of it out for yourself. The first item on this list I literally can't rave enough about, and they're called Sprigs. If you're anything like me, you don't want cables sticking out all over your camera rig. You can risk a cable getting snagged or pulled out unexpectedly, which can cause some serious and potentially expensive damage to your camera. That's where Sprigs come into play. If you've never heard of them, they're these little cable management anchors that screw into your 1/4-20 or 3/8 inch threaded holes on your camera rig. They're made from this flexible material, and to install them, you just screw them into place wherever your heart desires. Now, mine are a little chewed up on the bottom part, which is the anchor side, but keep in mind I've had these for 4 years now, and I'm constantly changing my setup to fit the needs of a particular shoot. So even after all these years, they still hold firmly in place. If you've ever tried to get a macro shot without a macro lens, or you're shooting with anamorphic lenses which have terrible close focus, it can be impossible to get as close as you want on your subject sometimes. That's where having an inexpensive set of diopter filters comes in handy. This is a set of 4 filters, which are labeled +1, 2, 4, and 10. All you have to do is take one of these, screw it onto the front of your lens, and voila, you're now able to peer into the souls of your enemies. You can also stack a couple of these filters together, but just know the more glass that you put in front of your lens, the more your image sharpness will start to degrade. Also, make sure you get the correct thread size for the lens or lenses you want to use. I've adapted all my lenses to 82mm threads through step-up rings, so the ones I have here are 82mm. If you've been a filmmaker for any length of time, chances are you've heard of the company SmallRig. If you haven't, they're a company that makes a ton, probably too many accessories for filmmakers. To be honest, I haven't been impressed with the quality of most of the things I've purchased from them, with the exception of these little clamps and magic arms. The mini clamps they sell in particular are incredibly useful for mounting small lightweight items like panel lights, for example. The top part here spins like a vise to open and close the clamp. They also have a 1/4-20 and 3/8 inch screw holes on the back, which are where you attach these little arms. The most common way I use them is with a 5 or 7 inch magic arm and a mini clamp on either side. I've also used them to mount acrylic mirrors to stands, clamped lights to tables, or to hold small bounces or negative fills in place. Next is an item that at the very least is fun to say, which is a Snoot. This is an attachment that will go onto the front of your light. Think of it as a small tunnel that your light will shoot through to narrow its beam of light. Now, unlike a projector mount, Snoots don't have glass elements inside them to focus your light. So with that, you will have a pretty large loss of output, and there's no way to focus the circular beam of light they produce. Even with that being the case, they are very handy as a slash of light in your background. I've also used them to replicate the light from a projector. They're super small, easy to pack up, and they're especially handy if you don't have a projector or spotlight mount in your lighting kit, like myself. I wish I did. Now, acrylic mirrors might sound like a weird one, and that's because it kind of is. Buying or even renting reflector boards like the Godox Lightflow or Lightbridge Cine reflectors isn't cheap. However, the results you get with them are pretty freaking great. That's where these small acrylic mirrors come into play. You can bounce light into one or more of these to get that beautiful, natural-looking hard light. Now, the one I have is super janky, but it works for my use case, which is really small shoots, indie films, or even just like a YouTube setup like this. Now, an interesting thing about acrylic mirrors is you can actually bend them to get some really interesting patterns and shapes, which is probably one of my favorite ways to use them. Now, are these a direct replacement for the more expensive mirror boards? Not even close. But they're a great inexpensive option to, at the very least, experiment with. If you're wondering what those magical clamps holding the acrylic mirror in place were, those, my friend, are called A-clamps. Of all the grip gear I have in my kit, A-clamps are by far the item I use the most. You can use them to clamp fabric in place, hold gels onto your lights, keep your cables and your wires organized, whatever you want. They're super versatile, and if there's one thing on this list I would say you need to buy this thing right now, it would be these. I'm a firm believer that your light, whatever light that may be, is almost useless if you don't have a way to properly modify it. That's why I love this little impact flag kit, because it comes with a variety of ways to modify your light. Now, this item is specifically for beginners for two reasons. First, the flags are small, so they can be used well with small lights. And second, it gives you a sampling of different ways to modify your light and to experiment with it. In the kit, you get some silks, negative fill, some nets, and they're all in different strengths. Additionally, all the flags have standard pins for C-stands. The entire kit is really small, doesn't take up a whole lot of space, so it's no big deal just to throw it in the back of your car and have it as a backup on a shoot at the very least. Be honest, how many times have you taken off your lens, looked at your sensor, and blew on it to get rid of a piece of hair or some dust that was on there? Now, how many times have you done that and spit on your sensor? I'm guilty of both of these, and let me tell you, spitting on your sensor right before a shoot with a client is a great way to have a panic attack, which is why I now use one of these. I call them air rockets, but they go by many different names, some more appropriate than others. You just squeeze it to blast air at your sensor or lens to remove dust or whatever else. For me, it's a permanent part of my camera kit, and I recommend you make one of these a permanent addition to yours as well. Next up is something I go through so much of, I should probably take stock in the stuff. That stuff being gaff tape. Gaff tape is a cloth-based tape that's popular because of how strong it is and the fact that it leaves little to no residue once it's removed. It's used for a whole host of things, from covering cables to quick emergency fixes on set. Think of it like a filmmaker's duct tape. I was gifted a ton of rolls from a buddy of mine from this brand called Lockport, which is why I have so much of it. It's a little cheaper and not as strong as my preferred gaff, which is made by Gaffer Power. Companies will claim that gaff tape doesn't leave behind sticky adhesive at all, which isn't entirely true. If it's on something for a long period of time, or if the gaff gets hot, it will definitely leave behind residue. Also, it can and will remove paint from the walls. So instead of using gaff tape, use this next item instead. You'll probably recognize this as masking tape or painter's tape. However, if you want to impress your friends and family with cool film lingo, call it spike tape. So why not just use gaff for everything, since it's so great? And it is great. Well, like I said earlier, it can damage walls by removing paint. I've even seen it pull up pieces of an expensive epoxy flooring, which was such a great day. It was so much fun. So for some situations, it's a little too strong. My personal favorite use case for masking tape, spike tape, is to mark the positions for talent. You'll often find this stuff in packs with lots of different colors, which makes marking a set with multiple talent super simple. With this next item, if you get creative, the ways you can use it are quite literally limitless. This is Cinefoil, but because we're trying to impress our friends with cool film lingo, let's call it black wrap. This is basically really thick aluminum foil that's covered in a black coating. One of the most popular uses for black wrap is to block out light. This can be in the form of a makeshift flag that you attach to your light, or blocking unwanted light spill from a fixture. It's great for this because it's heat resistant, and because of its matte black finish, it absorbs light like a negative fill. You can also create your own snoot by rolling it into a tube, or you can take a big sheet and cut holes in it, and you have yourself an improvised cucalores, also a fun name. And these are just some of the things you can do with black wrap, and like I said, your imagination will make this limitless. Next up is the reigning champion in practical lighting, the Aperture B7C. If you're not familiar, this is an RGB light bulb that has an internal battery that can be screwed into a light socket. You can then use your phone to control it wirelessly, which is simply beautiful. Another interesting use case for these is to take one of these light socket adapters to power the light from an outlet, and then you can move it wherever you want, which is pretty sweet. Now it's time for the one item I bought as an impulse buy and never thought I would actually use. Turns out I'm using it right now, and it's, hold on. It's this mini iFootage tripod. All right, I'm gonna be real with you. I wasn't expecting this thing to be any good. Like at all. I never saw iFootage gear as high quality, and they're one of those companies that manufactures just about everything. So when I opened this up and pulled it out of the box, I was shocked when it wasn't thin, flimsy aluminum, and instead was well built, like very well built. There are 3 height adjustments that lock into place on the legs. It's a ball head mount, so it's easy to set your pan and tilt. And these little threads are they're both 1/4-20 and 3/8 inch. Like, it took me a year. It took me a year of using this thing to figure out it was both. Should probably read the instructions next time. Also, this collar pulls down and the entire top comes off, and they claim it can support up to 13 pounds, which to me is a pretty bold statement for such a small ball head mount, but turns out they're telling the truth. And that's it. I hope this was helpful, or at the very least educational. If you enjoyed this video, of course, give it a like. And down in the comments, let me know what your favorite piece of inexpensive gear is to use while you're shooting. As always, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time with me today. I truly can't express how much I appreciate you, and I'll see you again in the next video.